Have you ever noticed how the world talks about a woman who lives alone? Not with curiosity, but with suspicion. Not with respect, but with pity. They say she must be lonely, bitter, broken, that no one chose her, so she must not have been worth choosing. But what if that's not the truth? What if the woman who walks alone is not unloved, but unafraid, not unworthy, but unwilling to trade her peace for proximity? There's a story they keep selling us, that a woman's value is only real when someone else validates it, that unless she is paired, claimed, or possessed, she is somehow failing. But let's be honest, how many women do you know who lost themselves in the chase for that kind of approval? Women who made themselves smaller, quieter, more palatable, just to avoid being alone. This woman didn't fail. She woke up. She stepped out of the fairy tale and into something deeper. And no, she didn't find applause waiting. She found silence, space, and then finally herself. The world never taught us what that kind of woman looks like. A woman who doesn't need to be chosen to feel valuable. A woman who defines her worth from within. The lie was that she needed to be rescued. But the truth, she was saving herself all along. What if everything you believed about a woman alone was wrong? There's a difference between being alone and being empty, but the world rarely makes that distinction. When a woman lives by herself, they assume something is missing: company, love, validation. They assume silence is a sign of lack, but for her, silence has become sacred. It is not a punishment. It is not loneliness. It is peace. Her home doesn't echo with absence. It pulses with presence. The absence of noise is the presence of intention. Every corner of her space reflects her choices, not compromises. She doesn't fill her time with distractions, or her bed with bodies just to escape the sound of her own breath. She listens. She slows down. She dares to be with herself. That alone terrifies people, because most run from themselves. They fear their own stillness, but she's turned that stillness into strength. Her solitude isn't the result of a door closed by someone else. It's a door she closed on her own, deliberately, lovingly. She has learned to find music in the quiet, to feel the pulse of life in the still moments. This is not a void, it's a sanctuary. And while others chase noise, she has discovered the rare, radical truth that silence, when chosen, doesn't echo with sadness. It resonates with self. And in that resonance, she found something most people spend a lifetime avoiding: herself. When a woman begins to choose herself, the world doesn't cheer. There are no standing ovations for stepping away from toxic patterns, no medals for saying no to crumbs. Her awakening happens quietly, like a flower blooming at night, invisible to the masses, but deeply felt in her bones. She begins to notice things: the exhaustion she once called normal, the anxiety she used to accept as part of love, the way she dimmed herself, softened her edges, tried so hard to be easy, just to be tolerated. That version of her didn't disappear overnight. It unraveled, slowly, painfully, one disappointment at a time. And no one saw the moment she decided enough was enough. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a whisper, a subtle shift, a moment in front of the mirror where she realized, I deserve more. That realization doesn't get you flowers or applause. It gets you silence, distance, even criticism. People don't like it when a woman stops asking for permission. They call her difficult, arrogant, cold. But she knows better now. She knows the cost of staying small, and she's not willing to pay it anymore. Her awakening didn't announce itself with fireworks. It came like a storm breaking after long drought, fierce, cleansing, necessary. And now, No matter how lonely the path gets, she walks it anyway. Because once you've tasted the truth of your own power, you can't go back to pretending you're weak. Her breakthrough didn't come with applause, it came with silence. People often assume she chose solitude because love wounded her too deeply. They picture her hiding, nursing broken dreams, scared to feel again. But they don't see the full story. Her decision to be alone didn't come from fresh pain. It came from a wound that finally stopped bleeding, a wound that taught her, because once she did love with abandon. She gave more than she had, bent herself in shapes that pleased others but disfigured her spirit. She confused intensity for intimacy, apology for affection, and when those illusions shattered, the pain was real. But pain wasn't the ending, it was the invitation to go inward, to trace her scars not with shame but with curiosity. She started to see the patterns, how she overgave to be seen, how she stayed just to be chosen, how she called it love when it was really fear. Fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. That recognition didn't bring peace right away. It brought anger, grief, exhaustion, but then it brought wisdom. Wisdom that whispered, you don't have to break to belong. You don't have to ache to be loved. What began in heartbreak ended in healing. And that healing birthed boundaries, strength, sovereignty. So no, she's not licking her wounds anymore. She's learned from them, and that makes her dangerous. Because a woman who turns her pain into power is no longer looking for rescue. She's building her own sanctuary, one truth, one choice, one sacred no at a time. Her scar didn't close her, it opened her to the truth. There was a time when she said yes to almost everything, yes to invitations that drained her, yes to relationships that dimmed her, yes to being agreeable, accommodating, available, even when it cost her peace. That kind of yes wasn't kindness, it was survival. It was a way to avoid conflict, to feel wanted, to buy belonging with self-abandonment. But one day, something inside her broke, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She realized every time she said yes to someone else, while betraying herself, she carved another crack in her own soul. So she began to say no, and not the polite, apologetic no we're trained to give. She said no with her chest, with her silence, with her absence. At first people didn't understand. They called her selfish, cold, even cruel. But she didn't explain herself anymore, because that no wasn't rejection, it was revelation. It revealed who respected her boundaries and who only loved her compliance. That no became her compass, her shield, her song. Every no cleared space for something truer, for peace, for purpose, for real connection. She no longer says yes to prove her worth. She already knows it. And when she says no now, it echoes with all the times she silenced herself to avoid being abandoned. Not anymore. Her no is sacred now. It protects the woman she fought to become. And if that unsettles people, so be it. Because peace, not approval, is her new priority. There's a hunger that once lived inside her, the need to be chosen, not just loved, but picked, seen, claimed. It ran so deep. It shaped how she dressed, how she spoke, how she behaved in rooms where she didn't even want to be. That hunger made her betray herself more times than she can count. She became the kind of woman who auditioned for affection, who waited for texts like lifelines, who tolerated silence because at least it wasn't rejection. But something shifted, slowly, quietly, like a tide turning. She stopped craving selection and started craving truth. She realized that being chosen by someone else meant nothing if she kept abandoning herself in the process. So she changed the question from "Am I enough for them?" to "Are they aligned with me?" And in that shift she reclaimed everything. Now she watches instead of reaching. She listens instead of chasing. She observes energy instead of falling for words. Her standards didn't become higher, they became honest. She no longer asks to be seen. She reveals herself only where safety exists, and in that clarity, many disappeared. Not because she's hard to love, but because they were never ready to meet someone who doesn't bend to be kept. She's not waiting to be chosen anymore. She is the chooser. And not many can handle that kind of reversal, but she can. Because when a woman chooses herself, everything changes, including the kind of love she'll accept. Carl Jung once said that everything we deny in ourselves becomes part of our shadow. And this woman, this solitary, sovereign woman, is a living reflection of that truth. She's not just someone who lives alone. She is a mirror that unsettles, because when people see her, they don't just see a woman, they see what they've been afraid to become, or worse, what they've been too afraid to admit they want to be. She reflects the dreams buried under people-pleasing, the truth silenced to keep peace, the wholeness traded for approval. That's why she triggers so many. Her presence isn't loud, but it's confronting. She doesn't demand attention, but she holds it. Without trying, she becomes a spotlight, exposing the shadow others have avoided in themselves. And when they call her names, cold, distant, arrogant, they're really labeling the parts of themselves they've disowned. But she knows. She sees it. She used to do it too. She used to look at strong, quiet women and assume they were damaged, hardened, unreachable, until she became one and learned firsthand what it costs to live honestly. It costs comfort. It costs illusions. It costs fitting in. But in return, you get yourself. You get your truth. You get peace. And that's not something she's willing to trade anymore. So if her presence disturbs you, ask yourself, what is she reflecting that you haven't faced? Because the shadow doesn't lie. It only waits to be seen. And she is its living mirror. Chapter 8. The Myth of Emotional Dependency. They taught her that love completes you, that without a partner, you're unfinished, an emotional half waiting for your other piece. And for years she believed it. She mistook connection for completion. She confused being needed with being loved. But when the illusions collapsed, when she stood in the silence of her own space, she didn't find emptiness. She found power. She saw clearly how often she had depended on someone else's validation to feel worthy, how she tolerated indifference just to feel accompanied, how she called it compromise when it was really self-erasure. That realization broke her, but it also built her, because she learned something most never do. She doesn't need to be completed. She already is. Emotional dependency was never love. It was fear dressed up in intimacy. And she's not afraid anymore. Now she creates connection from overflow, not lack. She gives without disappearing. She shares without sacrificing. The myth is that we're incomplete on our own. The truth is that most relationships are formed between two people hoping the other will fix them. She won't do that anymore. She won't be a patch for someone else's brokenness. She wants mutual nourishment, reciprocity, depth. And until that shows up, she's not waiting. She's thriving. Because needing someone is not the same as choosing them. And this time it's choice that leads. People look at her life and see distance. They see a woman who lives on her own terms, and they label it loneliness. But they misunderstand her completely. This isn't exile, it's intention. The walls she built around herself aren't to keep the world out. They're to keep her soul in, to keep her rooted in the truth she bled to earn. For years she let anyone walk in. People with sharp words, shallow intentions, hungry eyes. She let them sit at her table, drink from her cup, and leave her emptier each time. And when she started closing the door, not everyone applauded. Some knocked louder. Others insulted the lock, but she didn't flinch, because what looked like withdrawal was actually protection. This fortress isn't cold, it's sacred. It's where she reclaimed her time, her energy, her essence. She decorates it not with gold, but with boundaries, with silence, with stillness. And yes, sometimes with solitude. But that solitude isn't punishment, it's restoration. She's not unreachable, she's discerning. She's not bitter, she's careful. Her energy is no longer up for grabs. It's earned, shared with intention. She knows the difference now between connection and invasion, between closeness and consumption. So she guards her peace the way others guard their reputation, fiercely. And if that makes her fortress misunderstood, she accepts it, because inside those walls she has something no one ever gave her before, herself. They say, "You're too picky." They say, "Nobody's perfect." They say, "You should give him a chance, he's trying." She hears it all, and she smiles, not with arrogance, but with quiet defiance, because she knows something now that took her years to learn. Settling isn't kindness, it's self-betrayal. She used to believe in potential, in fixing, in being reasonable about red flags, and that kind of tolerance nearly cost her everything. So when they say she's too selective, what they really mean is, you won't lower your standards for convenience anymore. And she won't, because she's not asking for a fairy tale. She's asking for maturity, for presence, for emotional availability that doesn't vanish when things get real. They call it being picky. She calls it honoring her growth, because the bare minimum doesn't even scratch the surface of what she's now capable of giving and receiving. And that smile she gives when people judge her, that's not sarcasm, it's awareness. It's the calm of someone who finally sees the game for what it is. She's not waiting for perfection, she's waiting for alignment. And until that arrives, she'll keep her peace, keep her power, and keep smiling. Because now she understands. A woman who knows her worth never begs to be understood. She simply lives it. They look at her solitude and assume she must have been destroyed by love, that she's hiding, licking wounds, afraid to feel again. But they couldn't be more wrong. She didn't walk away from love. She walked away from what people called love, but felt like slow erasure. Her past relationships weren't all heartbreak, but they taught her hard truths, that affection without respect is manipulation, that attention without effort is noise, and that charm without integrity is just a mask. She's not bitter, she's aware, and that awareness makes people uncomfortable, because it's easier to pity her than to recognize her, easier to reduce her to unlucky in love than to admit she outgrew the version of love most people still cling to. She's not hiding, she's evolving. She's a visionary, not a victim. She's not waiting for someone to heal her. She already did that. Alone. In silence, through years of inner work that no one applauded. She used to shrink for closeness. Now she expands in solitude. She used to believe that suffering proved her love. Now she knows love should never require self-abandonment. What she's creating isn't a life of isolation. It's a life of integrity, a life where love will be welcome, but only if it arrives clean, conscious, and real. And until it does, she's not lacking, she's leading. Chapter 12. The Death of the Pleaser. There was a time when she wore approval like armor, when her self-worth was stitched into how much others liked her, needed her, leaned on her. She was the helper, the fixer, the one who always said yes. Even when her soul screamed no, being liked felt like survival, disappointing others felt like a personal failure. She smiled when she wanted to cry, gave when she was empty, softened herself to fit into spaces never meant for her. But eventually, the cost became too high. Piece by piece, she lost herself in the name of being easy to love. And when the cracks grew too wide to ignore, she stopped. Not suddenly, but deliberately. The people-pleaser in her died, not with rage, but with resolve. She realized that pleasing others at the expense of her truth wasn't love. It was emotional exile. Now she doesn't ask for permission to be whole. She doesn't negotiate her boundaries for temporary peace. She doesn't need to be liked to feel worthy. She speaks more slowly, pauses more often. And when her soul feels uneasy, she listens. That's what freedom looks like. Not rebellion, but reclamation. And if someone leaves because she no longer performs for their comfort, she lets them. Because the only approval she can't live without anymore is her own. She used to crave intensity, the roller coasters, the hot and cold texts, the passionate arguments followed by desperate apologies. It felt like love because it moved fast, hit hard, and left her breathless. But that wasn't love, it was emotional chaos. A cycle of highs and lows that distracted her from the quiet, steady ache of her unmet needs. She mistook drama for depth, mistook emotional turbulence for passion. But drama feeds on fear, on insecurity, on the unhealed parts of us that confuse adrenaline for connection. It took her years to understand that love isn't supposed to feel like war. It's not meant to deplete you. True love is not loud, it's consistent. It's not addictive, it's grounding. So she stopped chasing the thrill. She started listening to how her body felt after conversations, not just during them. And when the noise fell away, she realized how much peace she'd been trading just to feel alive. Now she's not impressed by declarations made in desperation. She's drawn to presence, to patience, to someone who doesn't need to shake her world to be seen. Her version of intimacy has changed. It's not about being consumed anymore. It's about being met, soul to soul, truth to truth. And if that makes her boring to some, she welcomes it. Because she didn't come here to entertain chaos. She came to be loved in peace. She used to reach for connection, for clarity, for crumbs of affection that barely held her together. Every unanswered message stung. Every delayed reply made her question her worth. She poured herself into people hoping they'd see her, value her, choose her. But the truth was, they only saw what they wanted, took what was easy, and left when she asked for more. For a long time, she thought it was her fault. Too much, too emotional, too complicated. Until she realized she was simply giving too much to those who were never meant to receive her. That realization didn't make her cold. It made her clear. Now she doesn't chase, she doesn't prove, she doesn't beg. Because her energy is sacred, and it's no longer up for discount. She knows the signs now. She feels when someone is inconsistent, when their words don't match their presence. And instead of asking why, she walks away. No explanations, no second-guessing, just peace. Because peace is the new standard. She doesn't ask, am I enough for them? She asks, are they enough for the life I've built? That shift changed everything. Her presence is no longer an offering, it's a privilege. And the moment someone makes her question her value, she knows it's not love, it's a lesson. And she's not in school anymore. When she disappears, it's not to punish, it's to preserve. Her absence is not a power play, it's a boundary. For years she stayed longer than she should have, in conversations that drained her, in dynamics that silenced her, in relationships that asked her to make herself smaller just to keep the peace. But now, when the energy shifts, she listens. When her soul goes quiet in someone's presence, she trusts that silence, and she leaves, not with drama, not with revenge, just with clarity. Her absence is the loudest thing about her now, because it speaks of a woman who no longer explains herself to those who don't hear her when she's present. Her silence unsettles people who once fed on her accessibility. They say she's changed. She has. She no longer gives out pieces of herself in the hope of being understood. She no longer stays in places where her intuition whispers no. Her departure isn't rejection, it's self-respect. It's a signal. I will not stay where I'm not safe, where I'm not seen, where I'm not celebrated. Her leaving isn't about who hurt her, it's about who she's becoming. And that version of her, she doesn't look back. Because once you learn how powerful your absence can be, you stop wasting your presence on places that never deserved it. They see her by herself and assume she's been left behind. They call it abandonment. They call it loneliness, but they're wrong. She wasn't left, she left. She chose this. Not because she hates people, not because she gave up on love, but because she finally understood the cost of staying in places where she had to beg for warmth. She's not alone because no one wanted her. She's alone because she stopped wanting to disappear in someone else's story. There's a vast difference between isolation and solitude. Isolation is what happens when the world turns away. Solitude is what happens when you turn inward. And that's exactly what she did. She turned inward and found a whole universe inside her, a place where she didn't have to edit herself, where her silence wasn't judged, where her depth wasn't too much. This isn't exile, it's expansion. The kind of expansion that scares people who need noise to feel alive. She's not abandoned, she's anchored, rooted in her own presence. And when the nights get quiet, she doesn't panic. She breathes. Because this quiet no longer feels empty. It feels like home. That's what people don't see. She didn't choose to be alone out of bitterness. She chose it out of reverence for her soul, for her peace, and for the sacred truth that sometimes the only way to find yourself is to finally stop searching for someone else. Her solitude isn't just hers. It carries the weight of generations. She walks with the memory of women who never had this choice, who stayed because they had no option, no voice, no room to breathe. Women who swallowed their dreams, their anger, their desires just to survive. And now she stands here, alone but sovereign, not as a tragedy, but as a triumph. She is the end of a cycle, the daughter of the silenced, who finally learned to speak. She's not just protecting her heart, she's honoring a lineage. She hears them in the silence. The whispers of grandmothers and great-grandmothers who never had the luxury of choosing peace over partnership, truth over tradition. And when she says no, when she walks away, when she builds a life on her own terms, it's not just her voice speaking, it's theirs too. She is their healing, their rebellion, their liberation. That's why her solitude feels holy. It's not loneliness, it's legacy. She's breaking chains with every boundary, writing new myths with every step forward. And she doesn't need validation for that. She doesn't need the world to understand, because she knows. When she stands tall in her wholeness, she's not standing alone. She's standing with every woman who came before her and never had the chance. And that, more than anything, gives her the strength to keep going. She used to override her gut. She'd hear that quiet whisper, "Don't go, don't trust, don't stay," and ignore it. She called it empathy. She called it giving people the benefit of the doubt. But deep down it was fear. Fear of losing love, fear of being alone, fear of being seen as difficult. And every time she ignored her intuition, it cost her peace, dignity, pieces of herself she didn't know she could lose. Until one day she stopped. She started listening, closely, without trying to justify, fix, or explain away what she felt. Now her intuition is sharp, fierce, untamable. It doesn't whisper anymore. It roars. She doesn't need to hear someone say the wrong thing. She feels it in their energy, their posture, their silence. And when something feels off, she trusts it, fully. She no longer needs proof to walk away. Her gut is the proof. That's her power now. Discernment without drama. She doesn't investigate red flags. She doesn't hope for clarity from people who thrive in confusion. She senses. She steps back. She protects her field like sacred ground. People call her guarded, but she's not hiding. She's filtering. Her energy is no longer for public consumption. It's earned. And if someone wants access, they'll have to come with presence, with truth, with depth. Because her intuition, it doesn't negotiate anymore, it knows. And she follows. She still wants love. Let's be clear about that. She wants the late-night conversations, the laughter that fills a room, the safety of arms that understand without words. But what she doesn't want, what she refuses, is to lose herself in the process. She's done with disappearing, done with adjusting herself to fit inside someone else's vision, because she's already done the work, the hard, holy, brutal work of remembering who she is. And she won't trade that for anything, not even love. So when people say she's too independent, she doesn't flinch. She knows what they mean. She won't settle. She won't chase. She won't pretend. She won't confuse control with care. What she wants now is different. She wants love that's mutual, not manipulative. Love that sees her, not just uses her. Love that respects the space she's carved out of years of silence and healing. She's not waiting to be rescued. She's already safe. What she wants is partnership, not possession. Expansion, not entanglement. And until that kind of love finds her, if it ever does, she's not in waiting mode. She's in growth. She's in wholeness. She's in love already, with her own life, her own rhythm, her own reflection. And that kind of love, it doesn't beg. It invites. And only truth gets through the door. She doesn't walk into a room hoping to be seen anymore. She walks in whole, complete, not perfect, but grounded. Her energy doesn't ask for permission. It announces itself quietly, without performance, without apology. People feel it. They don't always understand it, but they feel it. Because she no longer leads with lack. She leads with essence. She used to believe love would complete her, that without it, something was missing. But that belief was inherited, not chosen, conditioned, not true. Now she knows better. She's tasted the richness of her own company. She's met her shadow. She's honored her silence. And in doing so, she discovered something radical. She doesn't need anyone to fill her. She overflows. That's why she's so misunderstood. People don't know what to do with a woman who isn't asking for validation, who isn't molding herself to be chosen. They call her intimidating. But it's not intimidation, it's integrity. Her wholeness is not a wall. It's a filter. It protects her from entering spaces that can't hold her depth, from shrinking for people who only know how to love fragments. She won't be a fragment again. She's not half of anything anymore. And that wholeness, it's not a defense. It's a frequency, one only those who have done the work can recognize. The rest won't get it, and she's finally okay with that. Chapter 21. Archetype of the Wild Woman. She's not the girl who waits to be rescued anymore. She's not the one rehearsing her worth in the mirror, hoping to be picked. She is the wild woman now, untamed, unapologetic, rooted in truth, not tradition. She no longer fits into society's neatly folded archetypes: wife, mother, sweetheart, savior. She's not against those roles. She just refuses to be reduced to them. Because there is something ancient in her now, a memory not from this life, but from the women who came before, women who howled at moons behind closed doors, who wept silently while serving everyone but themselves, who had dreams too big for the rooms they were forced to stay small in. She carries them in her hips, her spine, her breath. And when she chooses solitude, when she chooses boundaries, when she walks away from comfort that costs her her soul, that is not selfish, that is sacred. She is not waiting for permission anymore. She is not interested in becoming digestible. She has grown too large for the cage, too loud for the silence that used to bind her. She is wild, not reckless, free, not fleeing, and every step she takes in that freedom cracks the foundation of a world that told her she had to choose between love and self. She refuses that lie. She chooses both, and if the world can't offer it, she gives it to herself. She used to think healing meant always being calm, always being kind, always being light. But real healing, it's messy, it's loud, it's raw. Shadow work isn't poetry, it's confrontation. And she did it. Not the Instagram version, not the hashtag self-care kind. She faced her own ghosts, the ones with her mother's voice, her father's absence, her own betrayal of self. She went into the dark, not to escape, but to reclaim. Every part of her that was silenced, abandoned, mocked. She went back and picked them up, one by one. Not to erase them, but to integrate them. Because Jung was right. Wholeness doesn't come from eliminating the shadow. It comes from making peace with it. She doesn't hide her edge anymore. She doesn't apologize for her anger, her grief, her depth. Those are not flaws. They are proof. Proof that she survived, that she felt deeply, that she loved without limits, until she learned to love with boundaries. People say she's changed, but it's not change. It's return. She has returned to the self that existed before the world told her who to be. And now that self walks with her, hand in hand with every shadow she once tried to outrun. She no longer seeks approval, she seeks alignment. And that shift, that's what makes her powerful, because she's no longer afraid of the dark. She became the light that knows how to live there. Before, her boundaries were vague, apologetic. She'd say it's fine when it wasn't. She'd say yes, while her soul screamed no. And every time she betrayed herself to keep the peace, she lost another layer of truth. But not anymore. Her boundaries now are sacred, not walls but thresholds, not fences but filters. They don't keep love out, they keep harm out. And if someone can't meet her where respect begins, she doesn't argue. She exits, quietly, clearly. Her boundaries don't come with explanations. They come with consequences, not as punishment, but as protection. Because she's learned real love honors boundaries. Real connection doesn't fear limits. It thrives within them. She doesn't set them out of fear, but from wisdom, from experience, from the nights she cried herself hollow after giving too much to people who only knew how to take. Now her no is complete. Her yes is clean. There's no more middle ground where her soul is sacrificed. People might call her difficult, but what they really mean is she won't be manipulated anymore. And she won't. Because her time, her energy, her presence, they're not casual, they're ceremonial, shared only with those who come with clarity, not confusion. And if that makes her circle smaller, so be it. She's not interested in crowds, she's interested in truth, and her boundaries are where truth begins. There was a time when her sense of belonging came from being included, invited, desired. She waited for calls, for attention, for someone to say, "You matter to me." But that kind of belonging was fragile. It depended on someone else's recognition, someone else's timing, someone else's emotional availability. And the moment they pulled away, she disappeared. But not anymore. Now she belongs to herself, fully, fiercely, quietly. She doesn't wait to be welcomed. She creates her own space. She doesn't seek mirrors. She's learned to see herself. That shift didn't happen overnight. It came from the ache of being overlooked, from the silence after goodbyes, from the void left by conditional love. But from that void, she built something indestructible, self-belonging. It's not loud, it doesn't parade, it doesn't post for validation. It simply lives, steady, grounded, undeniable. When she walks into a room now, she doesn't scan for approval, she checks in with her own energy. When she speaks, she doesn't soften truth to be liked. She speaks with presence, with grace, with rootedness. People don't always know what to make of that. Some are drawn in, others pull back. That's okay. She's not here to be understood by everyone. She's here to belong to herself. And that kind of belonging, it changes everything. It ends cycles. It silences doubt. It heals generations. Because a woman who belongs to herself no longer waits to be chosen. She simply is. If you've made it this far, something in you is stirring. Maybe it's the woman you used to be, the one who gave too much, waited too long, stayed too silent. Or maybe it's the woman you're becoming, the one who's learning to walk away, to say no, to breathe deeply in her own presence. Either way, this story found you for a reason, because deep down you know there's more for you than emotional crumbs. There's a love that doesn't demand you shrink, a peace that doesn't come from approval, a power that doesn't ask for permission. And that love, that peace, that power, it starts with you, with the choice to stop begging, with the decision to stop waiting, with the courage to say, "I will not abandon myself again." The world may not understand it. Some will call you hard. Others will say you're too much. Let them. Because they've never seen a woman who chose herself and never looked back. You have. You are. And now, your path is yours to define. There's no map, no deadline, no performance needed. Just presence, just truth. Just the sacred decision to live wide awake. So here's your invitation. Not to fit in, not to be chosen, but to rise, to walk in your wholeness. And if this message lit something inside you, don't silence it. Share it. Let it echo. Because when one woman chooses herself, she gives permission for thousands more to do the same.